With that, our first item of business today is House File 2172, Representative Wolgamott, a veteran of this committee. Welcome back. I will move that your bill, House File 2172, be re-referred to the Committee on Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law. There are some data provisions in this bill that they will need to review. And I also understand you have an amendment, but first of all, welcome back to the committee, Representative Wolgamott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. It's good to be back in transportation and see some familiar faces. I do miss being on this committee. You know, there's always next biennium, so good to be back. Thank you very much.
Well, we miss you too, but we know you're doing good work at other places. So, Representative Wolgamott, you have an A21 amendment. Would you like to incorporate that now?
Yes, please. It's just getting the bill in the shape that I would like it in.
Okay. Could you do a quick explanation of what the amendment does?
Absolutely.
We can also have House Research do that as well.
Yeah, I'll just defer to House Research. Thank you.
Mr. Burris, to the A21 amendment.
Mr. Chair and members, the A21-0086 amendment is a delete all. It would eliminate an account that is in the underlying bill and a statutory appropriation. Both the underlying bill and the delete all amendment has some data practices as well as incident reporting requirements. And then in the delete all, there's a fine revenue distribution provision that replaces the account and statutory distribution. Or statutory appropriation, excuse me, and that's found in section 2 of the delete all.
Okay, well, members, this is just a way for Representative Wolgamott to get the bill in the shape you would like us to consider it in, and many of the items that Mr. Burris mentioned, I think, will be under discussion when we take up the bill. So, is there any discussion to the A21? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. This is a motion to approve the A21 amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, the motion prevails. And we have the House File 2172 as amended before us. Representative Wolgamott.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start my presentation with a brief video.
Okay, let's cue up the video, staff, and we'll take it from there.
School bus stop arms exist to protect children as they are picked up or dropped off at school or home. We'll examine requirements for vehicle drivers regarding school bus stop arm safety, how these requirements are enforced, the consequences for violations, and how you as a motorist can help keep our children safe. In Minnesota, school buses make at least 10,000 trips daily. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, children are 8 times safer riding a bus to school than any other vehicle. Their safety while getting on and off the bus is crucial. And this is why stop arms were implemented decades ago. Yet, violation of laws regarding stop arms continue to occur on a daily basis, endangering our children statewide. Every year, we hear stories of children being hit or nearly hit by vehicles not obeying the stop arm law.
It was my first stop in the afternoon. I had signaled as I turned the corner, activated my 8 ways, opened the door, the stop arm's out, the red lights are on, and the children were departing the bus.
And my son came running in the house and said that Evelyn was hit by a car.
Bus was stopped, stop arm down and everything, and as she's crossing the street, there was an oncoming vehicle. The bus driver honked the horn, yelled Evelyn's name out the window.
The car was not going to stop.
And Evelyn stopped and looked back at the bus driver and then kept going because she didn't understand what was going on.
And she hesitated just enough for the car not to fully hit her. But she did keep going a little bit and the car clipped her.
Knocked her to the ground. The rear tire ran over her foot.
I'm very grateful because if Mickey, the bus driver, did not stop her or slow her down, she would have been right in front of the car.
It's eye-opening having firsthand experience with your kid getting hit by a car by someone failing to stop at a stop arm for a bus.
It was the next day, she didn't want to ride the school bus because she didn't feel safe. So it took a while for her to get back to normal. It was very hard.
It's stories like these that reinforce the point that everyone needs to pay attention to their surroundings and always stop for school buses.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members, for taking a moment to watch that video. You know, as the father of an 8th grader, it's always been one of my greatest joys. I know that many of you have kids and grandkids, nieces and nephews. It's such a joy bringing your child to the school bus, the excitement, spending time with friends. But that feeling can turn to gut-wrenching tragedy because we have too many drivers on our roads who blow right past our school buses. That's unacceptable, Mr. Chair, members, and that's why I'm bringing this bill before you today. We've seen too many injuries and fatalities due to other drivers passing a school bus while the emergency lights are flashing and the stop arm is extended. So the goal of this bill is to deter illegal school bus passings by equipping more buses in our state with stop arm cameras. According to a Minnesota Department of Public Safety 2019 one-day survey, 2,376 drivers reported 625 stop arm violations. Over the course of a 70-day school year, those figures add up to more than 106,000 stop arm violations and potential for serious injury or death for Minnesota kids waiting at bus stops. The National Transportation Safety Board recommended the installation of stop arm cameras on school buses and noted they can deter drivers from illegally passing stop school buses. Current Minnesota penalties for illegally passing a stop school bus include a $500 misdemeanor to the driver, or if the driver is unknown, a $100 petty misdemeanor to the owner of the vehicle. This bill, Mr. Chair and members, increases the petty misdemeanor penalty to $300 and directs $250 to the school district where the violation occurs for the purchase, installation, and maintenance of stop signal arm camera systems. There's a growing coalition of groups that have coalesced around the idea of equipping school buses with cameras to protect our children, including school groups, safety advocates, and law enforcement. I would love to have them all here to testify today, but in the interest of time, we've included their letters of support in your packets. So that's why I brought this bill forward. That's what this bill does. And with your permission, Mr. Chair, I'd like to turn over to Jean Solier, the CEO of Bus Patrol, which is one of the companies that install the cameras on buses to show you the technology available to assist law enforcement.
Thank you, Representative Wolgamott, and welcome to the committee, Mr. Soulier. Please state your name for the record.
Hi there, I'm Jean Soulier. I'm the CEO and founder of Bus Patrol. Thank you for having me today.
Please proceed with your testimony.
Wonderful. I'm a Canadian tech entrepreneur who spent most of his career worrying about how trucks moved our things more efficiently until I found out that school buses were being passed at the rate they are. And since starting our company and me moving to America, we've become the most deployed safety technology on the planet for school buses. We're on over 15,000 buses already with a lot more to go. I've also become an advisor to a variety of legislators as they pass legislation like what's being proposed today. And I've learned some pretty interesting lessons that I want to share with you all. One of the things about school bus safety, which is pretty unique, even though 80% of the illegal passes happen in more urban centers where there's more traffic, the deaths, almost 100% of them happen in more rural roads where the speed is much higher and the survivability of these accidents is next to none. So building a program that actually works requires that every bus be covered. And in order to do that effectively, what we've designed is a program that puts the cost on the vendors to go out there and install 100% of the fleet. removing the financial barriers that have kept the school bus kind of in this archaic technology world. You sit in your car, it's a spaceship, but when you sit in a school bus, it looks not much different from the one we sat in when we were kids. So we're trying to change that. And by making the amendments to the bill as suggested and passing it as is, what you will be doing is ensuring that 100% of your children are protected. But also what you'll be doing is you'll be making sure that the program changes behavior. When 100% of the school buses in any community are covered with this kind of AI technology, every single person that passes gets caught. And what happens then is we start to instill the same reflex that we see when we're driving down the interstate and we see a trooper. What's the first thing we do? We hit our brake and then we look at our speed. It's instinctive. What we're really trying to do here is make sure that we instill that same reflex in drivers. The hesitation in that little girl that saved her life, we're hoping to instill that same reflex in drivers so that their hesitation can save lives. We can change behavior. We can make the journey to and from school a safer place. Like I said, there's no one in the world that has had more experience in deploying these programs. And I'd love to answer any questions y'all may have. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Soulier. Are there questions? Okay, Representative Petersburg and Mr. Soulier, we have an interesting system. I learned this. I was at a meeting of various legislators. I'll get to you in a second. This is my introduction to Representative Petersburg. Now his curiosity is piqued. I was at a meeting with legislators and we had some people from the Ontario Provincial Parliament, and the person introduced himself as the minority critic. And so Representative Petersburg has that role on our committee, which I love the Canadian system because we call it the ranking member, but you know, he's a cooperative guy, but in some ways he's also the critic. So our minority critic, Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And really, this is about, are there other testifiers? Because if there are, this really is for the bill itself.
I think Representative Wolgamott, do you have other testifiers?
You know, as I mentioned, Mr. Chair, there are plenty of other people who support this, and I included their letters in the packets. But for the interest of time and out of respect for members of this committee and your busy agenda, I only have one testifier today. So
okay. So let's do this. Representative Barr, is your question to the testifier to the bill also?
Bill also, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, why don't we just get going? Thank you, Mr. Soulier. I don't think we have any questions of you, but Representative Petersburg, why don't you proceed?
So there are a couple of different questions. Whenever we get to videotaping people's performance and so forth, we get into the idea of private data versus public data. My understanding from talking with bus companies and so forth, this is kind of a 180-degree video camera that gets turned on when the arms go out to record anything that might happen. How are we handling the data after it is processed? In other words, is that something that's destroyed, eliminated, etc.? And then the second follow-up question is how did you determine the penalty from $300? I'll ask that question a little bit later, but first, just a question on regards to the data and privacy issue.
If I may, I can answer that.
Okay, Representative Petersburg, I think Mr. Soulier will answer that.
Fine.
Mr. Soulier.
Yeah, no problem. So essentially what's happening is we have an artificial intelligence engine that's on the bus, and every time the bus stops, it's plugged into the telemetry of the bus. So when the lights flash, we know to look. That stop arm event, that call it 30-second moment in time, is what's transferred over to the cloud to be processed to determine whether an evidence package can be built from it. Once an evidence package is built, it's shared with a law enforcement technician or officer to approve it. If the ticket is approved, then it's sent to the offender and then follows its course. If it is disapproved, everything is purged from the system in an automated fashion, and the data is used exclusively in support of the enforcement of the traffic laws in the jurisdictions that we serve. Also, everything is built with the latest cloud cybersecurity and meets all the privacy legislation that currently exists in supporting of automated enforcement, as well as the FERPA requirements that schools are under.
Okay. Mr. Chair,
Representative Petersburg, you had a second question. I think it's appropriate for you to ask that now.
yeah, thank you. It revolves around just the fee structure for the fine itself. I'm assuming, I'm not into public safety knowledge as well, but I'm assuming going from $100 to $300 doesn't change any threshold for going from a petty misdemeanor on up to something else. So that's one part of it. The other question is, it seems to me, if I remember right, the $100 that was the fine was going into the department's coffers. Now it's only $50 that's going there, and $250 is going to bus companies and so forth. So the question is, what made you choose 300? And will there ever be a time in which all the buses are covered, and so there may be an excess amount into this fund?
Would that be for Representative Wolgamott, perhaps, or I don't know if that's one for Mr. Soulier.
I can
Probably
go
Wolgamott.
with that, Mr. Chair. Yep. So we went with that amount because that's a maximum that's allowed for a petty misdemeanor.
Okay.
And then we're doing that we made that increase just so that we can generate revenue to the schools for installation on this. We are hopeful that this would be as cost neutral to the state as possible. We picked a number that wants to create just an adequate revenue stream. I mean, there's no magic number. If you have a magic number in mind, I'm more than opening it, but that's just what, based on the conversations I've had, consultation with other places that this has happened throughout the state, that just seemed to be the right number that worked to achieve the goals that we're trying to here. Unless Mr. Soulier has anything else to add.
Yeah, I would just say that the fine is in line with the legislation that's being passed across the country, and essentially keeping these programs well funded. And again, kind of bring back to my example in my testimony, covering 100% of the buses. There are many buses in rural areas that would never issue enough tickets to get the technology. So the core thought and the underlying principle here is safety and making sure that 100% of the buses get this technology, and that's the priority.
Follow up, Mr.
Representative
Chair?
Petersburg.
Yeah,
Representative
thank you.
Petersburg.
No, I think that makes all sense. It's kind of intuitively what I anticipated. However, it does seem like we reduced the fine going to the department from $100 to $50, while also increasing their work in regards to issuing the tickets and so forth. So is there a negative cost reflected in any kind of fiscal note or anything?
Representative Wolgamott.
I would defer that to House Research.
Maybe Mr. Lee.
Mr. Chair and members, yeah, so the fiscal note for this bill came in with the original version of the bill, so before the TE amendment was adopted. So once this bill gets re-engrossed, a new fiscal note request will come out. There will be some changes in terms of the assumed impact of the fee amount. To your question specifically about potential foregone revenues, in both the original version of the bill and the Senate version of the bill that also has the $300 fine, there is some calculation of those. I don't want to say what a potential fiscal note would be. I would need the agency to finish that fiscal note, but it would be impacts in the judiciary budget area that would relate to the general fund, but also touching potential transportation funds like the trunk highway fund.
Thank you.
If I can add, Mr. Chair, the increase. Thank you. We also predict that the increase in the number of tickets will cover the lower amount to the local jurisdictions.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Yes, please, Mr. Soulier.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a data point. So in Pennsylvania in 2018, across 16,000 buses, there were 667 tickets issued by the standard manual process of police cars catching people. So when we did our pilot on 2 buses in Allentown over a month, we found 205 violations. So the odds of a police officer being present when this happens is infinitely small, and automated enforcement is going to increase the number of tickets, therefore increase the education and the revenue streams. So notwithstanding any reduction in distribution, it will represent a significant increase in overall revenue for all the parties involved.
Thank you, Mr. Soulier. Representative Barr, and then Representative Torkelson, and then Representative Heinrich. Representative Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't know whether the bill author, Mr. Soulier, either one can answer this, I suppose, or address it. We used to, well, there was a time maybe 20 years ago, the state was had implemented some red light cameras, and those were found to be unconstitutional because the officer wasn't actually line of sight, didn't actually see the violation, and yet you had it on camera. This is catching it on camera, and I'm kind of curious if you're just going to take another stab at getting the court to reverse itself, or is there a different thought process behind this, a different legal angle? I mean, I'm not opposed to the idea of making our kids safe. Please don't misconstrue that, but I do want to try and avoid as many future court challenges as possible before we spend a lot of money in that and have to go tear it all back out again.
Good question, Representative Barr. Would either the author or testifier take a shot at that one?
Mr. Chair, I'll defer to the testifier.
Okay. Mr. Soulier?
Yeah, I would just say that Bus Patrol funds 100% of the capital to these programs wherever we go. So we're writing significant checks to deploy technology, and we are also on the same page. We want to make sure that when these tickets are issued, that we're not at risk of contestation and reversal of fines, and that everything that we are going to be doing up to implementation is going to be to make sure that we draft this with your partnership in a way that can be accepted by the courts for your state laws. So we are very sensitive to that, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Representative Barr, did you have a follow-up?
Mr. Chair, there we go. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I don't really have a follow-up, but it doesn't sound like I actually got an answer to the question from either one. I mean, I understand being sensitive and whatnot, but red light cameras have been deemed unconstitutional in Minnesota by our state court. And I didn't know if there was a different angle they were using, because it's videotaping an action that is later transferred to a law enforcement agent who will then write the ticket, not being present. And that was what the problem was. And it seems to me that this is exactly the same thing as that was. So like I said, I did not hear an answer to that. And Mr. Chair, could you tell me what the path of this bill is? Is it going to go to judiciary after?
Yes,
here?
yes. Representative
All
Barr,
right.
thank you. I was going to even suggest that that would hopefully be something that would be very much scrutinized in the Judiciary Committee. That's where it's going from here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I think constitutional questions are legitimate here, of course, and but that is definitely an area that I think will demand exploration, in addition to some of the data concerns that Representative Petersburg had brought up. So again, important to talk about them in this committee, but they'll certainly be very relevant to the next committee. Okay, I have Representative Torkelson, Representative Cagle, and Representative Elkins. Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my first question is for the testifier. That has to do with the connectivity of this data. You mentioned it going to the cloud. Does that require a internet connection from the bus? Can you explain that a little more?
Yeah,
Mr.
no
Soulier. Mr. Soulier, please.
Yes, it is a cellular connection that's used. We're compliant to a multitude of cellular networks. We don't run on the public internet. We run on private networks that are built for us, as an example with FirstNet. When a bus goes in a rural area of the province and the connectivity is weak, then when it gets to a stronger one, the system is smart enough to know when to queue up these events and send them over to the Amazon Web Services backend that's supporting all of this.
So,
Representative Torkelson, and by the way, I have Representative Heinrich next.
If I may, Mr. Chair, so that data then is held temporarily on the bus
That's correct. So on the bus, there is an encrypted, call it an industrial computer that we equip the bus with. It has a modem connectivity that is, again, using encryption on our private network to gather evidence and then transmit it over the cloud.
Thank you. If I may ask another question, quick question, Mr.
Representative
Chair.
Torkelson, proceed.
Thank you. This would be of the author. Have you had a conversation with law enforcement? I know we've looked at the possibility of traffic cameras in work zones, and law enforcement has some serious reservations because of the fact that they'd be issuing tickets remotely.
Representative Wolgamott.
So the question was just if I've been in conversation with law enforcement.
Correct.
Yes, I have, with law enforcement as well as with DPS. And it's up to law enforcement to make the decision whether enough evidence exists to issue the ticket. This just gives them more data to be able to keep our kids safe, and they will have that discretion whether or not to issue a ticket.
Well, Mr. Chair. Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Wolgamott. But they also have to have somebody that sits down and looks at these tapes. And there's not been a willingness to commit to those extra expenses in other areas. And I would hope that you would be discussing this with law enforcement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Torkelson. Representative Heinrich is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Mr. Solier. I was just wondering if he could give us some ideas of cost for installation and hardware, and then if there's like ongoing subscription fees or setup fees for the cloud software. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Solier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Absolutely. There are no costs, no upfront costs at all to any partner, whether that be a municipality, a city, a school district. These programs are funded exclusively out of collected ticket revenue, and Bus Patrol invoices a percentage of that collected ticket revenue. So the government is never in any risk of losing any money on the programs whatsoever. And that includes ongoing maintenance, as well as the reimbursement of fees. And there was a question earlier about law enforcement. So law enforcement, to give an example, typically for every 1,000 buses, it would represent no more than 2 full-time equivalents. So we're talking about a few hours a week in most cases as we deploy this, and all of the hours spent by law enforcement in support of the program are reimbursed and paid for by the program. We've designed this to really remove all the financial moats that exist to encourage participation and really encourage the rapid deployment of the technology.
Representative Heinrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm wondering, Mr. Solier, if you could give us a cost for installing the hardware and the hardware cost into a bus. We're taking maybe one bus. What would that run?
We don't charge anything. We charge, it's all a percentage of revenue. So we charge a percentage of collected revenue, and we pay for all those costs. There's never any upfront costs. Now, what's the value of the equipment that we put on a bus? It's roughly $5,000 of equipment up front, plus another $1,500 of installation. But the operating of the program requires a lot more than that. And again, Bus Patrol takes on 100% of the cost, whether it be labor, paper, maintenance, equipment, connectivity, data, all of those things are all covered by the program.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Heinrich. Okay, we have 2 more questions. Representative Cagle, and then our last one is from Representative Elkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is kind of similar to my flaggers bill last year. And so from my understanding, bus drivers are already given the ability to cite people who don't obey the stop signs. And so what this would do then is allow them just a little bit of evidence. I think when, the kiddos are getting off the bus, we want to make sure the bus driver is paying attention to the kids and not trying to, grab license plates of every car that comes by. And so this would give me a little bit of peace of mind. I've got some time before my kiddo goes off to school, but I think that, once I see her getting on and off the bus, this would give me a little peace of mind. And so I think, it's really already aligned with what we're allowing bus drivers to do. And this just really gives a little bit of support to those bus drivers. So just a comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we have Representative Elkins, and then I'll take one final comment from Representative Koznick, or question. Representative Elkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And so it might be a question for Mr. Burris, but my recollection on the red light camera law wasn't that the use of red light cameras is unconstitutional. It's just that it's not authorized by state law, which requires that a crime be observed by a person in addition to the camera. And as Representative Cable was just observing, in this case, the camera is recording the same thing that the driver sees anyway. So this wouldn't come into into account in any case. So if Mr. Burris can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my recollection.
Mr. Burris, on the constitutionality of the legislation.
Mr. Chair, Representative Elkins, the case that comes to mind for me as well was not really discussed in constitutional terms. It was the Coleman case that dealt with the powers of Minneapolis or a local unit of government to do automated enforcement under state statutes. I'm not aware of a separate constitutional discussion of that authority.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair. That's my recollection as well. It's the same as Mr. Burris.
Okay. Thank you. And our last question or comment comes from Representative Koznick. Representative Koznick, are you connected here? I see a hand, but no Representative Koznick. Okay, well, if we can get him connected here before the end of the conversation on this bill, we'll call on him. But is there any further discussion to this House file 2172? Okay, final comments from our author, and then Representative Koznick. One last. I see your face now. Are you connected?
Can you hear me? I was my
video's
locked up.
We're not going to do anything on this bill without hearing from you. So, if you have a question or a comment.
Just a quick comment, and I apologize. My video was locked up. My mute was locked up. But I really appreciate the.
We've all been there.
I'm in the state office building, so I appreciate the intent of the bill. Keeping our kids safe is obviously paramount. I just need to say that I have concerns, and I'm sure this will get more vetted out in the judiciary. But essentially, what I've heard the testifier say is there's a profit incentive on the number of tickets that are written to the supplier of the technology. Sure, the schools will get some of this money, but I have real concerns, and I'm sure people on the judiciary will as well, that the more tickets you write, the more funds and revenue stream will be generated. So that's a big concern for me, aside from the other things. And I guess we're just laying this over, so I won't be voting, but that is a big concern that I think needs to be publicly stated.
Well, Representative Koznick, I think we're planning to move this bill to, I don't know if that's your intention, Representative Wolgamott, to judiciary at this point. So, and it may stay there. I mean, they may want to take a look at it. I don't know if what the path would be after that.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, may I just add something to that last comment really quickly?
Sure.
Representative Koznick, just to give you some comfort, Bus Patrol does not approve a single ticket. So the concept is to do a separation of duties where law enforcement's judgment is used and the vendor is used as a financing mechanism and to build quality evidence when these incidents occur. And that's where the separation between the approval of the ticket and the money and the vendor takes place. So we're able to enforce the law, or we're able to provide evidence to the right authority so they can enforce the law as they see fit on their territory. Just a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Solier.
Thank you.
Representative Koznick, anything else?
No, I think I made my comments. Thank you.
Okay, good. Representative Wolgamott, final comments before we vote.
Very much, Mr. Chair and members, and for the safety and security of all the children across Minnesota, to help them get to school safely and soundly, I ask for your support to send this bill to the Judiciary Committee. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, members.
Thank you, Representative Wolgamott, and thank you. I think you had a couple bills on school safety in 2019, so we appreciate your ongoing work on this issue, school bus safety. With that, members, I'll renew my motion that House File 2172 be re-referred to the Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law Committee.
Mr. Chair.
Dodge, please take the roll.
Mr. Chair, this is John. Just want to make sure I heard you correctly that it's as amended.
Oh, I'm sorry. House File 2172 as amended. Thank you, Mr. Howe. And on that note, we'll take a roll call. Mr. Dodge.
Bernstein.
Aye.
Bernstein, aye. Vice Chair Cagle.
Aye.
Cagle, aye. Representative Petersburg.
Aye.
Petersburg, aye. Representative Barr.
No.
Barr, nay. Representative Bernardi.
Aye.
Bernardi, aye. Representative Elkins.
Aye.
Elkins, aye. Representative Frederick.
Aye.
Frederick, aye. Representative Hausman.
Aye.
Hausman, aye. Representative Heinrich.
Aye.
Heinrich, aye. Representative Koznick.
No.
Koznick, nay. Representative Mason.
Aye.
Mason, aye. Representative Murphy.
Murphy, aye.
Murphy, aye. Representative Nelson.
Aye. Nelson, aye.
Nelson, aye. Representative Olson.
Aye.
Olson, aye. Representative Richardson.
Aye.
Richardson, aye. Representative
Aye.
Torkelson, aye. Representative West.
No.
West, nay. There are 14 ayes and 3 nays.
Thank you very much, Representative Wolgamott and members. This bill is now on its way to Judiciary Finance.